This is the Vibe GT. This is my wife's Toyota Matrix. Basically, they're the same car, with one exception. The Matrixes were built in Cambridge, Ontario by Canadians, where the Vibes were built in Fremont, California by American Union Labor, which was the only factory that Toyota ever had that had union labor. Now, why are they called Pontiac Vibes? Because it was a 50-50 deal between Toyota and GM. They were building cars in the United States. Toyota saw the handwriting on the wall. They were probably going to have any kind of import tax on Japanese cars, so they made these in Fremont, California. Now, before that, it was a GM factory. People were drunk on the assembly line. They had horrendous quality. So, Toyota and GM got together and they started NUMMI. Yes, it's a real thing. It stands for New United Motor Manufacturing Incorporated. It doesn't exist anymore, but it did exist in the past. And Toyota allowed these union workers to stay, work in the factory, but work under the Toyota brand of how to build cars, where they care more about quality. They build them correctly. And as such, these are still excellent cars. Because, why, there's a Toyota Celica engine. Because this is a Vibe GT. This has the Yamaha designed 4-cylinder engine that puts out quite a bit of horsepower. Now, the Celicas, they had a lot of problems with them blowing up. Guys were revving them too high. They didn't have the right amount of baffling plates on the oil pump, so if you cornered like a maniac, oil would go to one side, the oil pump would suck air, and the engines would blow up. Every single customer I've had with the Toyota Celica GT that had one of these Yamaha design engines blew up the original engine and ended up putting other engine in. One guy went through 3 separate engines. He liked driving them fast. But does this look like a race car? No, it's a Toyota Matrix built on a Toyota Corolla chassis in the NUMMI factory in Fremont. They made Toyota Corollas too. They made a lot of vehicles there. Realize, NUMMI in Fremont produced almost 8 million of these Pontiac Vibes and Toyota Corollas. They're excellent vehicles, and of course, you can get them dirt cheap. This got $230, he bought it with $180, and he paid a whopping $800 for the vehicle. He did have to get framework done because started out in Norway, Maine, and ended up in Massachusetts. Salt water takes its toll. So he had problem with the control arms going. So he had the control arms replaced. But you can see, other than superficial, the frame itself is still pretty solid. Now, it's nothing like my wife's Matrix. That thing is totally solid. But then again, it came from Texas, Arizona, and now it lives in Tennessee most of the time. So it doesn't have any rust on it at all. And being a GT, this has the original alloy wheels. You can see they're pitted, but they work. They hold air. You could repaint them if you wanted. And after all, the wheels on my wife's Matrix, those are aftermarket ones that came with the car. The guy in Arizona originally owned to put those on. And they're really nice alloy wheels. They've held up really well. You got to consider that these are 15 years old now, and they're still in excellent shape. Even though they're dirty, I need to clean them. So if you are looking at a northern version of one of these Pontiacs, look for rust and corrosion. If it's all rusted and corroded away, you really don't want to buy it. In this case, subframe is okay. Control arms, the blind bolt got screwed up, so he just had those all replaced. And the thing is, these are just Toyota Corollas in disguise. You can get parts everywhere. You can get parts from overseas dirt cheap that are perfectly fine, because almost all the parts on Corolla type vehicles are totally interchangeable. This is made in California. They're still well made. Check it out. Still got the original alternator. Now, he doesn't know if the AC works. We'll have to try it later because he's never even tried it. He doesn't care. Aside from the Pontiac badge, different plastic, and some different body parts on the car. You don't see this on the Matrixes. That's all Pontiac stuff. It's basically a Toyota. As you can tell by just looking to the dash. Here's the Vibe. See the instrument panel? And here's my wife's Matrix. See the same instrument panel? So it's dependable. Gets good gas mileage. They can run basically forever. It's just a Toyota Corolla in disguise. Originally, the Toyota Matrixes were called Toyota Corolla Matrix, and they just shortened it to Toyota Matrix. Knowing how lazy Americans are, I'm surprised they didn't just shorten it to Toyota Ma or Toyota M. Who knows? Now, when GM went bankrupt and there was a big recession, they stopped their participation in the NUMMI, in the New United Motor Manufacturing Incorporated, so they shut the whole thing down. But interestingly enough, now the factory is where they build Teslas in California. So they went from horrible quality GM cars, 80s and 90s, to pretty well-built Japanese cars, but when the deal fell apart, now they're making poorly built Teslas. What comes around goes around. What do they say? You know, the circle of life? Well, the circle's back at square one, making poor quality vehicles in the Fremont, California plant. Rather ironic there. This has a cold air intake modification, which I'm not a big fan of. And one of it broke, so it's got a tin can inside there taped up so it doesn't suck air, but it runs good, so. And as you can hear, got an exhaust leak. Turns out that the gasket between the exhaust pipe and the front of the muffler has disintegrated, so it just needs one part. It's not that big of a deal. He's having a hard time finding it, but you can find him online. And if you wanted, who really cares? You could just weld it together if you wanted. I mean, it's just an exhaust system. Now you're always going to hear a little clacking on these engines. That's totally normal. But in this case, it's more the fuel injectors clacking just from old age. But it still gets almost 30 miles a gallon on the highway, so it's nothing particularly wrong. Now, he knows it's running a little bit rich. I put my scan tool on, but I'll tell you, he's got to fix the exhaust first, because if the exhaust has that big leak, that's going to affect the readings of the oxygen sensors, and that can make it all go squirrely. So we'll hook up our computer here. So he plugged it in, it's setting itself up, and we'll do an all module scan. And we'll see, the only thing that has problems is the power chain control module. So let's see what that says. It says that the fuel system is running lean. We don't care about the evap. We'll start it up and look at the live data. In the live data, you can see it looks a lot like my wife's matrix. Everything's pretty much the same, even the vents, except this is a 6-speed standard transmission, so you can zoom around a lot faster. Got the same handbrake, same chairs, same console, same back seat. Let's look at the live data. Far, everything's got good colors on it. But as you can see here, the data's a little squirrely. The short-term fuel trim, it's adding 19%, but the long-term, it's subtracting 25%. Now, truthfully, that makes no sense at all. So, like I said, he's got to fix that exhaust leak, put a new exhaust donut on the pipe going to the front of the muffler. Because with a leak like that, it's going to affect what happens with the oxygen sensors. And they're obviously squirrely, because there's no engine that's going to be adding a bunch of fuel short term, but subtracting a bunch of fuel long term. It makes no sense. But when you have that going, it's going to affect everything crazily enough. So I would fix that first and pray that that cold air intake isn't incorrect for the vehicle. Personally, I keep these things stock. I never change them. You start messing with that, you start messing with all kinds of stuff. It runs good enough. It's not like it runs horrible. It is running. You can see now it's stalled out just sitting there because we idled for a long time. It's obviously squirreling around with the fuel mixture. As you can see now, the short-term fuel trim is 0, and the long-term fuel trim is subtracting 25% fuel. So now, after we restarted it from it stalling out, the fuel trim is perfect. It's 0. So you got to fix the exhaust leak before you do anything. See, look at that. The short-term fuel trim just went to its adding 19, and it was 0 when we restarted the car. But really, as you can see, it's idling really smooth. Let's check the AC. He said he's never tried it. Well, I like trying things. He's never put any refrigerant in it, and lo and behold, the compressor's not turning. I can just about guarantee if you filled it up with refrigerant, it would start working again. All cars lose some refrigerant. I had to put refrigerant in our 07 Matrix for the first time ever last year. I emptied it out and filled it up, and then it was a lot colder, so some of it leaked out. So you could add that in, but he doesn't care. His girlfriend cares, but he doesn't care. Windows roll down perfectly fine. Aside from the different body panels, it's the same car as the Matrix that's made in Ontario, only it was made in California. It was made with union labor in the United States, but it was a Toyota GM mixture, so they did a lot better than the factory where they only made GMs before in Fairmont. They stopped selling in the United States for 2021, and we'll get into why. But first, we'll get into a little history of these things. Now, if you look at this thing, you wouldn't even recognize the original 1951, because it turns out that in 1941, the Japanese army captured a Willys Jeep. They took it back to Japan, and they reverse engineered. In other words, they copied it. Take a look at it. I mean, they look like Jeeps. They were Jeeps. And the early, bigger Land Cruisers, they had a 6-cylinder engine in them that had pretty much interchangeable parts from a Chevrolet straight 6 engine that they copied it from. They make them better and better and better as time goes on. So you might say, oh, Scotty, then why don't they sell them anymore in the United States? Well, they still sell them in the rest of the world, but it's a big V8 engine and it gets low gas mileage. You can get anywhere between 14.8 and 15.8 miles a gallon, depending if it's on a highway or city. And you might think, well, that's horrible. What's a big all-wheel drive vehicle? It weighs a lot, it's huge, and it's got this big powerful V8 engine. Now, you might think that's bad, but I had a customer in Houston, and he had an old one, and it had the big old straight 6-cylinder engine with giant coffee-sized pistons inside it, a carburetor, and a 3-speed standard tranny. He got single digits. Sometimes he'd get 6, sometimes he might get 8 miles a gallon. Those were tremendous gas hogs. When you consider the weight of this thing and the speed that it has, that's the best gas mileage it's going to get. They stopped selling in the United States. 2021 was the last ones I ever saw because it lowers the CAFE gas mileage rating. So the Americans penalize companies that have gas hog cars, and Toyota didn't want to make their whole fleet get lower gas mileage ratings, so they don't sell them in the United States. Like I say, they sell them lots of other places. People are nuts about these vehicles. If you're thinking about buying one in the United States, my advice is do it fast, because if you don't, the price is going to go even sky higher. This thing's got 160,000 miles, and he paid 28 grand drive out. These things have high resale values, but as you can see, low gas mileage. This is 16.3 combined city highway. Shows you all the trips people have taken. You got all your tire pressure. You can have the gas mileage while you're driving if you want. It's not running now, so it's not going to say anything. Since it refueled last time, it's getting 16.3 miles per gallon. Just realized you get one of these things, it's cavernous inside. There is a lot of space in these things. It's a gigantic armrest. The thing is huge. Now this is a 2009, so it's old school. But if you want a big, stable vehicle that's safe for your family, you can't beat one of these things. And even though it's older, it's still got electronic controlled transmission. You can play with all kinds of things, hill climbing, you name it. And being a Toyota, you know it's going to be reliable. It's going to start up every time. And even though it's old, it's still got a backup camera on it. And as I said, cavernous room, you can see the dog's been resting here. There's a bunch of dog hair. There's all kinds of space back here. Look at that. Real seats. They have a reasonable amount of room in them. Fold them up. You got a lot of space. And of course, you got many different ways to open it. You can open it part way, you can open it the whole way. It is a well-designed vehicle. And when you combine the size and weight and the fact that it's all-wheel drive, this thing is not going to get stuck in the snow. You're going to be able to go anywhere. Now, it's certainly gone a long way from the original copy of the Willys Jeep. It's still got a lot of roughness of the military vehicle, but it's got creature comforts well beyond anything that Willie would have dreamed up when he made the general purpose vehicle for the Army. And when the Japanese started to copy because they thought their Army needed one of those too. And of course, being a later model one, we're not dealing with any of this timing belt crap. It's all timing chain. It's all metal. You don't have to think about it. You just do normal maintenance. And it's certainly solid built. Listen to the hood. That's a hood. That's not a piece of tin rattling. And has he had any problems with it? No. Starts right up. The original owner took it to the dealer all the time, had all the maintenance done. Really, even if you don't do that, mainly you just need to change the oil and filter every 5,000 miles or so. It'll probably run just the same. You want to talk about a smooth idle. There's no shaking in this baby in gear. Now, normally you got to worry about the bump at the end of my driveway, but this thing's so high up in the air, we're not even going to slow down for it. I mean, it flies over that with no problem at all. You are high up in the air. You feel safe and secure. You can just feel the heft of this vehicle as you drive it down the road. And yeah, the gas mileage stinks, but there's nothing you can do about that. With a vehicle this big and this heavy, with that big V8 engine and the all-wheel drive in the rain, we step on the gas, this baby picks them up and puts them down without any kind of drifting or slipping. This thing was basically a modified Willys Jeep on steroids. So, unlike the Willys Jeep that can only go, 45, 50 miles an hour, rattled like mad, this thing does it with creature comforts. And can go a heck of a lot faster than that. And look, I've been driving, so the gas mileage is already starting to drop. Now, when I was younger, the Chevy Suburban was the thing for people to have for carrying families going around. Believe me, this thing blows them away. These things can regularly go 500,000, 600,000 miles or more. You will never get that out of a modern Suburban. But these, unfortunately, they're not selling in the United States anymore. because the gas mileage ratings too low, and Toyota does not want to lower their CAFE ratings in the United States. And yeah, if you're a purist, you're just mad about an automatic transmission, but they're very dependable, and really, in the United States, it's been a long time since they sold a standard transmission. They just didn't. You know, Americans want automatics. It's very dependable. I've never yet to see one break. The all-wheel drive system by Toyota has been pretty much perfected. It's an excellent system. It's just, you gotta live with low gas mileage. As usual in luxury Toyotas, the quality's high. Leather seats, car's getting older, leather seats are still in immaculate shape. You can see as I drive it, the gas mileage drops. It's now under 16 into the 15s. Even though it's old, hey, the GPS system from Toyota still works pretty good. We're right by the ocean there. You can see the blue. Kind of basic because it's an old system, but it works fine. For a vehicle this size, it's got very responsive steering, and with all this weight, excellent brakes. ABS system works fine still. It's a Toyota. They don't break down much. Let me tell you, I feel safe in this thing, you know? You're not worried about somebody hitting you, what's going to happen to me? No. You have to worry about what's going to happen to the people if you hit anybody. And just as in all my favorite vehicles, there it is. Made in Japan. Now, the owner had one question. He thinks, oh, the brakes are kind of soft. Well, they're not really soft. That's how they're designed for this. He had an FJ Cruiser before this, and he got rid of that because having kids, he said the suicide doors really got in the way, and so he made money on it, so it didn't really matter. But kind of strange that it came from a Willys Jeep to evolve into this luxury vehicle, right? They're not made for cornering at 100 miles an hour. You could do it if you had to, if somebody's chasing you, I guess, but they're made for comfort, safety. The one thing that a lot of people are always asking me about is, hey, how many miles are too many miles on a used vehicle? Well, this has got a lot of miles. Doesn't mean squat. I've seen these things with 400,000 or 500,000 miles on them. So, even though he had to pay 28 grand, if he went out and sold it today, he'd probably get 34 or 35, because since they're not selling in the United States anymore, just because of the bad gas mileage ratings, there's plenty of people that don't care that much about gas mileage ratings, especially older people that want safety, or people with a family who want safety that perhaps don't even drive all that much. They don't care what the gas mileage is, so something like this, that's an immaterial thing when they buy it. But the shape that this thing is in, if you would have blindfolded me, I couldn't have told you what year the vehicle was if I was riding in it. It works perfectly fine. They are overbuilt machines, and there's nothing wrong with getting one with this kind of miles, especially where he bought it. It was from the original owner. It had one owner, and they took it to the dealer all the time to get it maintained. Some cars like Jags, Mercedes, BMWs, Audis, you really got to make sure it was maintained correctly. This is a Toyota product. Heck, you could buy one new, probably just change the oil the first 100,000 miles, and nothing would probably go wrong anyways. But it's a good idea to get some kind of records how the car was taken care of, because you do need to know that the oil was changed. If you remember the Lexus that I did a few months ago in Tennessee, the guy unfortunately bought one for about 9 grand from a Toyota used car lot, and the engine was all worn out because they never changed the oil, the previous owners. And when I pulled those spark plugs off, saw how covered they were with burnt carbon, I said, get rid of this thing, change the oil, just get rid of it soon, because the engine's eventually going to wear out. You don't have to worry about it. The V8 engines, even though they get bad gas mileage, they have a long lifespan, much better than their new idea that they're putting in the Tundras of V6 turbos, which they're already having problems with. This is a tried and true engine that can basically run forever. But if you want to get one of these, heed my warning, you better do it fast, because since they're not selling anymore, the prices are going to go up. Look what happened to their cruisers. They stopped making them. I've seen people pay more money for used ones than they want brand new. So if you want to get one of these, you better look around fast and find it before the prices get even higher. I doubt if they'll ever bring them back to the United States, but you have to worry about parts. They're still making them, selling over the rest of the world. You don't care about gas mileage. You want a big, giant family car to take you around, and really hardly anybody takes them off-road. They don't need standards anymore. An all-wheel drive, you'll never get stuck. Yeah, you're going to pay for the gas mileage, and you're going to pay for the vehicle if you get a good one, because they're not giving them away. But consider what new cars, the average new car in the United States these days, sheesh, it's like 25 grand more than he paid for this. So this will probably outlast most of the new ones. This particular one was made in Indiana. That's where they started making them. The early ones look quite a bit like a 4Runner. 4Runners are all made in Japan. These are all made in Indiana. And this is Of course, a V8 with four-wheel drive. Now as we look inside, here we go. We got mechanical, low and high, and neutral. You shift it by hand. No electronic crap on this. Now, strangely enough, the man hardly ever uses the four-wheel drive because the roads here, as bumpy as they are, they're not made of dirt, and they're always cleared, and it doesn't really snow all that much in Rhode Island either. I mean, it's great in the snow, but it doesn't snow much. Now, under the hood, these I-Force V8s can last forever. They've only got one downside because it's an old vehicle, and as you can see, it's got a rubber timing belt in it. They work perfectly fine, but of course they're rubber. Eventually they'll break. They tell you to change them every 100,000 miles. So since it's an interference engine, if the belt breaks, the pistons will hit the valves and ruin the engine. So you're supposed to change it every 100,000 miles. And if you're a riverboat gambler like some of my customers, I've had customers of these things with over 200,000 miles, and they never changed the belt, and they were still running down the road. They are that well built. But if you're looking to buy one of these in a worry wart, get one that's got the timing chain, then you'll never have to think about it. But like I say, these belts last an awful long time. This vehicle has one gigantic problem. It's a gigantic vehicle. This one gets about 13 miles a gallon in town on a good day. They eat up gas. Almost every customer that I've had with one of these, I'll say, what kind of gas mileage you get? And they said, I'm afraid to find out. We fill it up all the time. I don't want to know how low it is. That's just how these are. They're four-wheel drive. They're giant heavy vehicles with the big V8 engine. They got decent acceleration, but they get the world's worst gas mileage. Now that Toyota's not selling the Land Cruiser in the United States anymore, this is their biggest vehicle. It's actually a very similar vehicle anyway. And even go back, in the early days, one year they sold like 68,000 of them. Last year in the United States, they only sold like maybe 8,000 of them. They're big, heavy vehicles that get lousy gas mileage. They're gonna be fading away as time goes on. Now this guy, he doesn't really care because Rhode Island isn't that big, and he's a mobile DJ. So, he doesn't have to go all that far. And man, you can fit a lot of crap in these things. Now, you'll see these little latches, the plastic under there, they break all the time. He used to stick a screwdriver in there, but now he just opens it from the side to load it and stuff. He could fix it if he wanted, but he doesn't really care. He can get all his gear in, get all his gear out, not get stuck anywhere with the four-wheel drive. And of course, there's all kinds of room inside. The leather's a little bit worn, but hey, you got these seats. Then if you want, you can have seats back there, but you can see, he's put a bunch of plywood in because he's carrying all his DJ equipment in it. He's even gotten rid of the top here so he can fit more stuff in. Now we'll look inside, and yeah, this is what happens. You get nice seat covers. Cover them up. The leather's going to rip. Toyota leather isn't the greatest. And we'll check inside. How many miles does this baby have? It's got 222,450 miles on it. And does it burn oil? No, it doesn't burn oil. It's a Toyota. These things are well made. It shits perfectly fine. It runs fine. It just gets crappy gas mileage. Got ABS brakes that work. And look, a transmission with an actual dipstick, so you can change it and check it yourself, unlike that modern crap. It has the original power steering pump, the original air conditioning compressor, and it's a Toyota. The AC is still freezing cold. If you go way under there, it doesn't have the original alternator. There's a story behind that. It wasn't charging, so they took it in. The guy replaced the alternator, didn't fix the problem. It turned out it was a wiring feeding the alternator that they had to fix. So it's got a new alternator on it. It's only the first one they changed, but the old one probably was still working fine because when they put a new one on, it still didn't charge. So it probably didn't even need that. That's how well made these are. You know, I'm always saying, oh, buy a Japanese vehicle made in Japan. Well, these were made in Indiana, and since 2022, they're making them in San Antonio, along with all the Tundras. They moved all the Tacoma production to Mexico. They're excellent vehicles still. Yes, they're gas hogs. They haven't changed all that much. They still use a lot of gasoline, but they can run forever. And what's more important to you? Let's face it, you're going to drive a big, heavy four-wheel drive vehicle. It doesn't matter what they do to the technology. It's going to use a lot of gas. If you're using it for business, it's a business expense. You're writing it off anyways like he is. It'll get you where you're going. It'll always start. Do you really care if you get one that, oh, this other big one doesn't get 13, it gets 20. It's really not all that different. And of course, if you take it on a highway and you drive like an absolute turtle, you might get 16 or push 17 if you're going downhill with the wind behind you. But enough of me talking. Let's see what the machine says. Oh, here we go. All right, we'll do an automatic scan. Now, as we look here, you can see The engine and the transmission and everything, totally normal. The only problem is there's some failures with the ABS system. We'll look at it, but who really cares? You don't expect ABS to work all that well on a vehicle that's this old. Circuit of right rear speed sensor, malfunction of control system, and the steering angle sensor, which is in here. I would never count on ABS on a vehicle this old anyways. He's had no problem stopping it, especially when you got a four-wheel drive system. You can just put it in high or low. It's not going to be skidding around. These things are so heavy. They're like 18-wheeler trucks. The reason the 18-wheeler trucks, you see them going fast in the rain, they don't care. They weigh so much, they don't hydroplane. As long as you keep good tires on it. We will go back to the engine and we'll look at live data. Start it up. We'll start checking out the data. Nothing's odd colored yet. The short-term fuel trim. It's only subtracting 0.04% on number 1 and 0.04% on number 2. That means that it's working at 99.96% of perfect. You can't get much closer than that on a vehicle that's this old with 200-something thousand miles. These things are made to last. But just realize, it's still a gas hog. It doesn't matter that it's working at 99.96% efficiency. It's still going to use a lot of gas because it's big and heavy and has a giant V8 engine. Check everything else here. See if there's any odd data. Look at all the data, even on this old car. And here we go. Misfiring of the engine. Okay, well, look at them all. 1 through 8. What do we see? Nothing but zeros. It does not have a misfiring engine. We know that. Just listen to how quiet that engine is. Rev it up. You don't hear clacking. You don't hear weird noises. Now, you're plenty high up in the air here. So in this case, you really don't have to worry about the giant bump that keeps water from going to my neighbor's yard. It'll just fly over that and you'll bounce around like a Porky Pig cartoon van, but hey, it goes. And when we're coming to the horrible bumpy Rhode Island roads, you see one thing, that it doesn't bother you. Yeah, it's old, the shocks are worn, but it's still a smooth ride on the bumps because it weighs so much and it's got a big wheelbase. It's still really comfortable. Now you're gonna hear a lot of noise in this because he took the insulation out and he's got a bunch of DJ crap and he took the third row seats out. So that you're gonna see, that's not the car's problem. He doesn't care about the noise, so you wouldn't either if you were driving it around. This big V8 engine, when you're pulling into traffic, it's got no problem at all taking off. Jesus, the cops are coming after us. You can see it's perfectly smooth for cruising around, and there's absolutely nothing that needs to be done to this vehicle except for the handle on the back, and he doesn't care. He used to use a screwdriver and I just use the back door, so you can fix it if you want. You can always get parts for these things. I mean, it's no problem at all. Check this out. It doesn't shake at all at idle with 220,000 miles. Listen to that engine. You can just hear that V8 engine humming. So what do I think? They're still making these things, although they're not making them in Indiana now. They're making them in San Antonio with the Tundras. As the bell tolls, they're still solid vehicles. Modern ones, of course, have more electronic stuff. Nothing like a simplicity that this machine is. They'll still last, but I doubt if they'll last as long as these old ones. Just realize one thing. If you're buying one of these, you're better off getting a timing chain one if you don't maintain right, so in case the belt breaks. Check the frame to make sure it's not rusted. They will rust if you get in a bad area. They can rust out. And realize older is actually better. These engines are so well made. You can get rebuilt ones that are perfect. You can get them for a low enough price. You can put another engine in if the tranny goes out, but they rarely go out. I've never seen a transmission go out in one of these, so I mean, that's how rare it is. But you can get anything on it fixed as long as the frame is still like this. Look, superficial rust, but sounds like new steel. And this is Rhode Island. They use a lot of salt here in the winter. These things are solid built. If this was an American vehicle, you go like this on the running boards, they crumble and they fall off. These are still solid as can be. You don't mind about gas prices, 13 miles a gallon. Yes, that's what they actually get. You'll be happy with one of these. If you don't drive that much, who cares? It'll get you where you're going, it won't break. And considering you're gonna buy a new car, what's the average car going for now? You know, 40-something thousand dollars. You can buy an awful lot of gasoline for that. I would get one of these and just keep fixing it forever. if I had one. Just realized they're not that easy to find because they don't sell that many. Yeah, this one was like 60,000 this year they sold, but last year they only sold like 8,000 of them in the United States. They don't sell that many. They don't make that many. They're not all that easy to find. So if you really want one and you find one, don't quibble over chicken chump. If they want 3 or 4 or 5 grand more than you want to pay, hey, just pay it if a guy like me says it's in good shape. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.